How's it, everyone? Welcome to another racket review right here on OpenCourt. So recently I tried out the new Yonex Percept 97. I actually really liked that racket. It was the successor to the VCore Pro 97. And as I was returning it and I was at my local pro shop, I looked through the demo rackets and I found a racket that really caught my attention, so I decided to try it. That racket is the Yonex Percept 100D. Let's check it out. Alright, so per usual, before I get into this review, I want to give a quick thanks and shout out to On Point Sports here in Hawaii. If you guys are ever in Oahu, specifically, check out On Point Sports for all your tennis related needs. Okay, so the Percept 100D. This is a brand new spec in the Percept line. Before they had the VCore 100, they also have the Percept 100. This D, the D stands for dense, so the string pattern is denser than the typical 100, which I'll get into later when we talk about the specs. Alright, so what's new in this Percept series? Well, they have some new technologies called the FlexCon, which is supposed to be a tapered, elongated shaft design. So it's supposed to be a little bit longer in the throat area here. And this box frame design, this is also supposed to be new. I like box frame designs. It gives a little bit more response, a little bit more stability. Yonex also brings back its iconic isometric head design. It's a bit more of a traditional isometric head. It's not like the new VCore series where it's really wide at the 10 and 2 o'clock positions. I'm glad they didn't do that with this Percept series, because when it was really wide here, I really felt a lack of control and a bit too much power with the new VCore 98. So I'm glad that Yonex decided to keep a more traditional isometric head shape. Also, the VDM has been discontinued, which was the vibration dampening mesh inside the handle. It has been replaced by a new dampening tech called the servo filter, which is supposed to be a transparent film between the graphite, which is supposed to absorb the vibrations. I don't know exactly where it is. It could be all throughout the frame, but when I did playtest with the 97, I did feel that racket was really soft, and that's something that I omitted to touch on in my full review because I ran out of time. That racket was really soft, and if this is the same, then I'm going to experience a little bit of a disconnect possibly, but the specs is really what caught my attention. So let's take a look at that now. Alright, so here's the specs, and one look at this reminds me of one of my favorite rackets of all time, the Head Graphene 360 Speed Pro. That's one of the rackets I currently still use. And the 305 gram 315 millimeter balance, that's right in my wheelhouse. I would prefer something a little bit more head light and a little bit more heavy overall, but that can be fixed with customization. What really jumps out to me here is the 18 by 19 string pattern. The string pattern is a little bit denser. It has 18 mains, but it only has 19 crosses. That is the one thing that I would fix in my Head Graphene 360 Speed Pro. I wish it was an 18-19 string pattern instead of an 18-20. 18-19 is my favorite string pattern of all time because those two extra main strings give the ball a little bit lower trajectory so I can take a full swing, but the 19 crosses means that it'll slide and snap back a little more for a little bit more extra spin. And in my opinion, the Speed Pro with its tight 18-20, that's its biggest weakness. It lacks easy spin. So I'm super excited to get this Percept 100D out on the court because the specs look very similar to my Speed Pro. So without further ado, let's jump on the court and let's play with this new spec, the Yonex Percept 100D. So let's start with the pros of the new Yonex Percept 100D. Before playtesting this 100D, my favorite Yonex racket was the VCore Pro 97. But I'm ready to say this. The Percept 100D is probably my new favorite Yonex racket. There are just a couple flaws that hold it back from being definitive, and I'll get into that in the cons section later. But as I expected, this racket felt very similar to my Speed Pro, only with a little more spin and power. I love 18-19 string patterns because I'm an aggressive swinger and I like to play full throttle, and the 18 main strings keep the trajectory of my aggressive shots low and I can swing away without worry about sending the ball long. But the 19 crosses are really what do it for me. Having one less cross string than my Speed Pro means the mains can slide and snap back more because there's less string resistance. This leads to higher spin generation and power. It's not a huge boost, but that small difference makes a big difference in a game like tennis, where the margins are so small. I played more singles recently than I usually do, and rallying from the baseline with the 100D was so much fun. I felt super confident attacking my forehands, but also scrambling around the court and defending was exhilarating as well. The 18 main strings keep slices low and sliding, so I could defend without giving my opponent chances to put the ball away. On ground strokes, the Percept 100D felt very similar to the Diadem Elevate 98 version 3 I playtested earlier this year. Both rackets have incredible control, but decent pop on the forehand stroke, and they are both very soft and comfortable. However, I felt this Percept 100D was superior on the backhand stroke. The extra real estate of the 100 square inch head gave me a bit more pop on my two-hander. The sweet spot was generous like just about every Yonex racket, and I could really feel the ball sinking into the strings when I struck dead center. This racket also gave me great directional control. I could hit left and right with precision. This helped in doubles when I was stuck rallying from the baseline and I wanted to avoid the net player. My ground stroke game is usually where I look for help from a racket, and this 100D gave me the confidence to go toe-to-toe with skilled baseliners. At the net, I really felt the effects of the isometric head shape. I could usually get the reflex volleys to hit the sweet spot, so I didn't feel immediately pressured when on the defensive. The Percept 100D is also very stable from the baseline and net. I felt very little twisting in my hand. This could be a problem on reflex volleys with smaller heads, but I felt solid contact whenever I was forced to dig back shots. I could hit for power pretty easily as well. Overheads felt powerful and punch volleys penetrated and stayed low. Volleys were fine, but I feel the 100D shines more from the baseline. If you already have an established net game, I don't think that 100D will add more to your front court skills, but it won't take anything away either. I really like the Percept 100D on serves. This racket allowed me to dominate my service game by allowing me to use my three main serves effectively and confidently. The 100 square inch head gave me extra pop on my flat and slice serves. Usually with denser string patterns, I have trouble clearing the net on my slice serve because of the lower launch angle, but the extra pop gave me just enough net clearance. The denser string pattern let me hit sliders that slid away from my opponent's strike zone. The biggest challenge for me with denser string patterns is hitting kick serves that bounce high and away. As most of you know, denser patterns have less string movement and therefore it's harder to generate ball rotation. This was not the case with the Percept 100D. I felt the main strings sliding well against the crosses, and I could hit kick serves that dove sharply and kicked up suddenly. The beam isn't the most aerodynamic, so I couldn't pronate as quickly as some other thinner rackets, but the 100D definitely gave me more spin on kick serves than my Speed Pro. I really want to try this racket with a full bed of crisp poly because I think that would add a new dimension to my kick serve and my baseline game. Overall, I just felt totally in command from the baseline, and I felt the Percept 100D complemented my aggressive game very well. Prior to this playtest, the previous VCore Pro 97 was my favorite Yonex racket, but now I'm pretty ready to say that this new 100D is my favorite Yonex racket. But that doesn't mean this racket is perfect. There are some flaws, like I mentioned earlier, that keep this racket from being something I would consider switching to. So now let's get into the cons of the Yonex Percept 100D. There are two things that hold this racket back from being just about perfect, and the first one is probably something many advanced players would agree with. The new Percept series is way too soft and muted. This was compounded by the fact that I tried this racket with a soft nylon multifilament. If I was to use this racket full time, I would immediately string this with a crisp poly that gives me the firmness and crisp feel. I handed this racket to a couple friends of mine who hit with it, and they also commented that they couldn't feel anything even when striking the sweet spot. This level of mushiness reminded me of the Head Graphene Touch series with its Crybond dampening agent. The Diadem Elevate V3 also uses Crybond, and those rackets are just way too soft for me. I felt disconnected on drop volleys and touch shots. That satisfying pop sensation was missing from this racket, and this is a big deal breaker for me. On the plus side, if you have arm issues and want a more forgiving racket that also gets good power and control, this would be a good option for you. The second con that holds this racket back from me is the weight distribution. I personally like something that is a little more heavy in weight but also a little more whippy and maneuverable. This can easily be fixed by adding weight in strategic places, but since I reviewed this racket in stock form, I am going to mention this. I want something that is around 330 grams strong, so I have some weight behind my serves and ground strokes, but also a 310mm balance so I can get the racket over my head on pronation and for reflex volleys and touch shots. I like something that maneuvers well at net so I can carve up the front court. If I were to use this racket full time, I would add some weight at the throat and also under the butt cap to get that heavier but whippy feel. But aside from these two issues, I had no problems with this racket, and I think this 100D might be what I compare other Yonex rackets to going forward. So who is the new Yonex Percept 100D for? Like I mentioned earlier, it's for players who have an aggressive game and want a good balance of power, spin, and control, but also want something forgiving for their arm. I don't have arm issues, so I want something stiffer, but if you're one of the many who suffer from elbow issues, the new Percept line is one of the most comfortable rackets I've tried. I believe this is more of a baseliner stick than a volleyer frame or finesse player. I wish more brands had an 18x19 option in their rackets because that is my favorite string pattern, and I'd like to know in the comments if you guys know any other good 18x19 rackets out there that were made recently. Also, what do you guys think of the new Percept line? Do you like or dislike the soft feel? How do you feel about the name change? Let's discuss in the comments. If you haven't tried the new 100D yet, give it a try. Thank you for watching this review of the new Yonex Percept 100D right here on OpenCourt. If you guys like this content, be sure to overhead smash that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you on an OpenCourt.